I wrote a speech a few weeks back when it was fresh in my mind, but my anger has calmed down a bit since then, so it might be as sharp. But if you recall, a few weeks back, there was a lot of news about this TPP, the Trade-Pacific Partnership Agreement that Australia signed into. And it got passed through the House of Representatives a few weeks ago without much opposition. There was some opposition from the Greens, but that was about it. And if you were to listen to the politicians and the media, you'd think this was the best thing that ever happened in Australia. They say it's going to stimulate the economy, bring jobs and bring lots of investment from big businesses. But I still keep an eye on the media back home in Ireland and in Europe, and I was getting some deja vu listening to all this, because we had something similar to this about a year ago back in Ireland, called the TTIP. They called it. It was the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And so some of the issues that came up in that were coming up in the TPP. Of course, the biggest issue was the fact that corporations can actually sue the government if the government tries to bring in legislation preventing them from making profit. And they had lots of trouble back in Europe trying to bring this through. You know, the governments were trying to bring it in, but they were having lots of hassle trying to bring it in, because it obviously left the countries wide open to being sued. But they eventually got it through. But it was passed through here in Australia without much opposition. But I looked into it a bit further to see if some of the issues that were coming up in the TTIP were coming up in the TPP. So I'll just give you a few facts about this TPP agreement. It took them 6 months to write, so there's lots and lots of small print. In fact, some of the analysts are still going through the small print trying to make sense of it. It's long and confusing, and I imagine that's the way it's designed to be. Of course, the big issue by some of the critics is that it does give corporations the power to sue governments if they bring in legislation to prevent them making profit. And our trade minister, called Andrew Robb, came on and said, no, not a hope. We have agreed terms that prevent the corporations from suing Australia. But I managed to pick up an article in The Guardian a few weeks back by a guy called George Cahal. Now this fella, he's head of the world's leading arbitration firm in New York. And he wrote an article about it. And he said that there was actually critical loopholes in the legislation that leave Australia wide open to being sued. He said that there were so many loopholes, he was getting dizzy reading it. And of course, it turns out that the only people that benefit from this TPP are big businesses. And he couldn't see in any way how this agreement benefits Australia and its people in any way. So I'll give you some examples of what to expect in the coming years because of this. So we'll take Germany, for example. They've had two big claims against the government in the past few years by a Swedish company called Vattenfall. They're a Swedish energy company. So first of all, the German government tried to put restrictions on a coal power plant that was in Hamburg. It was actually right next to a river, and they tried to bring in restrictions on it, on emission restrictions and whatnot. But Vattenfall actually tried to sue the German government for 1.4 billion for bringing in that legislation. And in another case, the German government tried to cut back on their nuclear power after the Fukushima incident in Japan. And this time Vattenfall tried to sue the German government for 4 billion. And in both cases, the German government had to abandon their plans to bring in the legislation because of the threat of being sued. And in a similar case, the Ecuador government is being sued for 1 billion by an oil company called Occidental. And that's a massive number for Ecuador. That's almost as much as their whole GDP. So they're obviously going to have to abandon their plans to implement the legislation that they wish to. So we can expect to see some cases like this occurring in Australia in the next few years. So in the next few years, the Australian government that are here at the moment, they're going to have a lot to answer for in the coming years. This deal is really bad for Australia. The more you look into it, the more bad you see how it gets. It's bad for Australian communities, Australian families, and the Australian environment. All it does is break down the borders for big multinational corporations and big businesses, and it helps them tighten their grip on Australian communities. it actually pains me to see how little this government actually care about the Australian people. The main objective seems to be to make as much money as possible now, and to leave the next generation worried about the big issues. For example, global warming and the asylum seeker issues. There was actually a sigh of relief came around the country when Turnbull overtook Abbott. But to be honest, like, was there ever going to be any real change when Turnbull took over? Actually, I recall a couple of weeks after Turnbull was brought in, there was something up in the media about that he had a couple of offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. And I'm not sure what happened, but it was kind of brushed aside and forgotten about the next week. But you know, like, he's not sending his money down a holiday, really, is he? He's avoiding paying tax in the country he's supposed to be running, I'd imagine. For example, you go to prison for doing that in America. Here we have our Prime Minister doing it. And of course, he's still going ahead with lots of Abbott's insane policies, embarrassing policies. For example, the Carmichael mine in Queensland is still going ahead. If you're not up to speed with that, it's a coal mine they're trying to bring through, and they have to dredge part of the Great Barrier Reef to allow the ships to come through. And they still have the turn back the boats policy for the asylum seekers, although the pressure is starting to mount, international pressure is starting to mount about their human rights abuses. But it's not all bad news. I know it must sound depressing now with the document tonight, but it's not all bad news. There is some bright cases coming through from Europe, especially. If you want to check it up, there's the new Era State movement in England, and Irish Water movement back home in Ireland, where communities are starting to stand up to these corporations, and the corporations are starting to back down. But I'd be concerned about the Australians' ability to stand together as communities, mainly because of the media that they're exposed to. But what advice I would give to you is to take control of the media you're exposed to. That's the most important thing, because education is the biggest issue here. So take control of the media you're exposed to, and start getting involved in movements in WA, for example, like fracking. And he's not here tonight, but Duncan is actually head of the Winemakers Association here in the Swan Valley, and the Water Corporation were trying to build a pipeline through the Swan Valley, but the Winemakers Association stood up to them and they had to back down. So if you look to people like Duncan, for example, we're going the right direction. So take control of what you're exposed to and be ready to stand up for what's right. Thank you.